agreement. So the plan for today is I'll introduce you to long distance agreement. The reason for introducing this to you first is that this is the next assignment. The next assignment is for you to investigate whether there are environments of long distance agreement in your language. Okay, so for the Hindi speakers, the issue will be, so I will show you some of the environments. You can see if you can find other environments, and also you can see what you think, like I will make certain claims here and you can react to those. Okay, so that's one chunk that I want to do. The second chunk that I want to do is kind of the homework for today, which is how is ergative licensed. Okay. So we look at what Anup Mahajan has to say about this, and we've already introduced two proposals, or well, one proposal that ergative is a dependent case, and we'll see how sensible, to what extent can we make sense of that in the context of Indo-Aryan languages. And we'll also look at a different proposal, which is that ergative is a kind of inherent case, which is, you can see Mahajan's proposal being in that camp. Okay, so we'll look at that. But before we do that, I actually want to do, show you something curious and ask you to reflect on that. It's not a homework, but if you can find similar facts elsewhere. Okay, so this is not on the slides. So let's just think about agreement in Hindi first. Okay, Hindi will not be fully revealing, so we'll have to move to other languages. So let's look at what features are involved in agreement. So, well, what features do we have to agree with? Person, number, and gender. So there's three. And as you know, no single probe in Hindi has both person and all three, right? Future comes closest, but it really is two probes, right? There's a person number probe and a number gender probe stuck together. Okay, so, but fine. If we look at the future, you can see a case where you see person, number, and gender agreement all together, right? So you can do the paradigm. You can say मैं आऊँगा, मैं आऊँगी. So you're getting gender. हम आएंगे. So you get number, and then तुम आओगे, right? So you also basically you have the full paradigm with subject agreement. Okay, you don't always see it. So for example, if you say let's do वो आया था. Okay, so in this case, when you have वो आया था, you don't, no matter what you do, you're only going to see person, number and gender agreement, right? And it's not a deep fact, it's a fact about the probes involved. So in वो आया था, you have two probes. You happen to have, one of the probes is the perfective probe, associated with perfective. That's a participial probe. It only agrees in number and gender. Now on top of that, we have a tense probe, but we know that there is this interesting fact about Hindi, that the past tense probe actually only has number and gender features. It does not have person features. So no matter what you do in this environment, you are not going to find. So when we say that there is person agreement, what we mean is that in some setting of participle and auxiliary, you can get person agreement. Okay, and so the way to look for that in Hindi would be to try wo aaya hai, right? To try it with the present tense auxiliary. Now we know that the present tense auxiliary has a person probe. Okay, so you have person and number. So now you can, now if you do मैं आया हूँ, तुम आए हो, so now you're getting person agreement. Okay, so this is the background with subjects. When you're doing regular subject agreement, you get number and gender, but you can also get person. Okay, so this is what we want to focus on. Now we look at objects. Okay, राम ने मुझे देखा है, राम ने तुम्हें देखा है, राम ने उसे देखा है. Nothing changes, okay? So at this point it's tempting to say that object agreement in Hindi does not involve person. Okay? This is not a false claim. Object agreement in Hindi does not involve person. There is no instance of object agreement in Hindi that involves person. But this is also a trivial claim. It's not a very exciting claim, because how could it be otherwise, right? There's a conspiracy in the language. So the conspiracy goes like actually it's the same kind of conspiracy when you guys were discussing Bangla, right? It's the same kind of conspiracy that keeps us from detecting any kind of non-subject agreement in Bangla. Okay, so I'll remind you of what went on in Bangla. Almost exactly the same thing goes on in Hindi. Okay, so what we saw in Bangla was that in certain cases when you had dative subjects, we wanted to find out whether there was agreement with the nominative element, or we don't know if it's nominative, but with the internal argument. But the problem was that in Bangla, you only agree in person. You don't agree, there is no, is there any gender? There's no gender, and there is no number agreement either. So the only thing you have is person agreement. Okay. So point one, you only think you have this person agreement. But in the internal argument slot, so only thing the language has is person agreement. Step two, what kinds of things can trigger real person agreement? No, I'm actually asking a slide, sorry, I should reframe. What kinds of DPs, if you want to check for person agreement, what kind of DPs would you look at? Unmarked, but so what I'm going for is first and second person pronouns, right? So only if you can't check first and second person pronouns, you'll never find person agreement. Okay, so that's step two. Step three is in Bengali, first and second person internal arguments are always marked, right? You cannot get there first and second person arguments in that location. Okay, end of story. So you are never going to get person agreement. Interestingly, in precisely that environment, in Hindi, you cannot get marked elements. So this is the parametric difference that we discussed between Bangla and Hindi. So in Hindi, you can say Ram ko main pasand hu, or Ram ko tum pasand ho. Okay, so we can check for person agreement there. Okay, but now let's come back to objects in Hindi. Now, just like in Bengali, when you have an object in Hindi, and if it is a first person or a second person pronoun, what happens? It will get marked, right? It will receive differential object marking. So you will, as we discussed earlier, you cannot say Ram ne, main, anything, right? So you have to say Ram ne, mujhe, mujhko dekha. Okay. So in Hindi, it's true that when you are doing object agreement, you're not getting person agreement, but it's not interesting. I mean, it's a fact, but it's a fact. It's not a fact that you need to write down, because it's a fact that just follows from the other aspects of the language, right? Just as the fact that the Bangla fact, right? We don't need to write down. Once you put all these things together, it just follows. Okay. So what we need is a language. What we would like to do is to find a language where things are different. Okay. So there are. So it's we have such a language in this room, and that's what I want to set up. Okay. So this language is Gujarati. Okay. So in Gujarati, what we know is that objects do trigger agreement. Okay. Even when they are co-marked, even when they are differential object marked. Okay. So let's. Okay, so maybe I can ask you to write some Gujarati sentences for me. So let's write a sentence like I have arrived. Yes. So just something like I have arrived and you have arrived. Yeah. Mhm. So actually, I want a slightly different form. Do you have? Can you use a present tense auxiliary here? Yeah. So without, I want the cho. The cho part is the part that's important for me. Yeah. Avya chu. Okay. And tu che. Okay. So we have a chu versus, and maybe just for fun, let's do the third person also, so that we have. Yeah. Okay. Hmm? This is, yeah. Well, he could focus on this for. Yeah, that we don't need that while we are looking at this. So yeah. Yeah. Okay, so note the fact that this auxiliary is going from chu, che, che, right? So three different forms, right? These two forms. So these two are the same. 2 and 3 are the same. One is different. Okay. Okay. So this is something which we will focus on. Okay. So now we've done. So what we've seen is that this auxiliary is perfectly capable of displaying agreement in person. Okay. Now what we want to do is I want to use the same auxiliary uh, and do something like Ram saw me, Ram saw you, Ram saw. Actually, why did we use? I want this is. Can we use singular? Is this a singular pronoun? Yeah. So if the and the marking would be the same. Okay. Okay. So now let's do Ram saw me, Ram saw you, and Ram saw him. So again, I want the auxiliary. Yes, exactly. Yes, Ram ने मुझे देखा है. Yeah, here's this is a back one. Actually, it's not open yet. So. Yeah, so precisely, we want Ram ने मुझे देखा है. राम ने तुम्हें देखा है. राम ने उसे और उन्हें उसे. Let's do उसे. I mean, let's do whatever we did in 3. Yeah. Okay, so something very curious has happened, right? Uh, if we were doing what we were doing here, right? So background, we are agreeing with this. As you can see, this, I think this is indicating number, right? Right. So you can see that there is agreement, but there is no agreement in person, right? When it comes to person, and this is very strange because it's not that this auxiliary has any problem expressing person features. So you have this. But somehow, when we come to agreeing with objects, so the mystery that is here is, why don't we say Rame Mane Joyo Chu, right? That is what you would expect. All else being the same, that is what you would expect. But you don't get that. Okay. This is a very, I think, interesting fact about object agreement. We don't fully understand this, but it seems to be true in other languages also, but I think if you look carefully, you might be able to find this fact in Marwari also. But we don't fully understand. I think what one has to say, we can describe it in the following way. We can say, so recall, right, like we were talking about how different Ks, so some Ks can be transparent, and some Ks, like presumably the Nepali ergative marker is fully transparent, right? It lets all features through. The Hindi Ks are fully opaque. Before, when we were talking about Gujarati differential object marking, we had the thought that maybe this was fully transparent, but it's not. And it seems to have something to do with the fact that it is object agreement. Okay. So you can sit. I'm done with the examples. So it's an interesting. The generalization seems to be that this has to do with object agreement. That while subject agreement can involve person, object agreement typically does not involve person. That seems to be one kind of generalization, though there is some grounds for. There are two things going on here in Gujarati and in Hindi. One is that you're doing object agreement. The second thing is that you're doing agreement with KP. You're doing agreement with something that is marked. We don't know which of these two things is responsible for the partial agreement. Okay. And the reason I bring that up is because there are, I've not worked with any speakers of these languages, but there are reports of that in Braj you can do something which you cannot do in Hindi, which is you can say Ram ne main dekha to mean Ram saw me. Okay. And I recently saw something about a claim. I mean, it's not clear exactly what language people have in mind when they're saying Haryanvi, but I also heard this claim made about Haryanvi, that in Haryanvi also you can say Ram ne main dekha. Okay, and when you say Ram ne main dekha, you do get person agreement. So it may not be a pure fact about object agreement. The object agreement fact might be confounded with this fact. Okay, but the reason I bring this all up is that when you're investigating object agreement in anywhere, and in a way also when we are investigating long distance agreement, because the same issue is going to arise with long distance agreement, keep track of what features are involved. If you find, so there is also a claim that long distance agreement does not involve person features. I think these are all related claims. There is one paper that at some point you guys should all read. I think it's probably, I included it in the set of papers. It's a paper by Mark Baker. It's on a generalization which he calls SCOPA. SCOPA basically says that, it basically says, well, one version, a slightly crude version and not completely accurate version of SCOPA says that you only get person agreement with subjects. What he says is no person agreement in long distance agreement environments. But what he wants to say is, so there was this old theory of agreement which was very popular, which said that you only get agreement in specifier head configurations. Okay. So that theory kind of went away because people started doing agreement under the agree, which did not require movement. But a residue remains, which is that what Baker and many other people have noted is that in environments which are clearly where the probe and the goal are clearly separated and the goal is lower, in those environments you don't have person features. While when you take something and you move it into the specifier position of the agreeing head, you have person features. Okay. So I think this in the languages where you can see this is a powerful generalization. I find it's very difficult to tell in Hindi whose specifier you are sitting in. So it's not a generalization that you can easily assess. So I'll give you a slightly different variant of this generalization. This is going to come up more when we discuss long distance agreement. But the generalization goes, so my revised generalization goes like this. Let's look at two kinds of agreement. Okay. So one kind of agreement is when a verb, when a head agrees with something that it assigns case to. So let's look at agreement with subjects. Okay. So when you have agreement with a subject in the kind of system that we've been playing with, so let's take a simple sentence like this, right? I have arrived, or I have come, something like that. In this case, by hypothesis, this guy is getting case from T. Okay? But T is also agreeing with this. So two things are going together. Okay? So this is one kind of agreement. You could think of this as like a symmetric, right? You give me case, I give you agreement. Okay? So that kind of agreement. When you have this kind of a two-way street relationship, you get person agreement. Or actually, I should qualify. It's not that you get person agreement. You can get person agreement if you have the right probes, if a person is in play, person is available. Now let's look at this. Again, by hypothesis, the thing that's agreeing is T, but T does not give case to this. This guy, if it's getting case, it's getting case from the verb. Okay? So this, I call this agreement dissociated agreement. Right? So in this is the case of agreement where case and agreement come apart. Right? One person assigns case, another person agrees. When you have this kind of agreement, person seems to be not available. This is not an explanation. Okay. Also, scopa is not an explanation. Scopa is more or less a description. And then there is a follow-up paper for that by Omar Preminger, where he argues for, where he has something to say. He says it's a good generalization. It's not exceptionless. So Preminger looks at some cases from Basque, where he claims, which he claims are counterexamples. The problem, not the problem, with Basque, if you think that Indo-Aryan languages have variation, you should go and talk to people working on Basque. There is enormous variation in part because there aren't, the pool of true native speakers is small because the language kind of dwindled and then a lot of people learned it again, so it's not dwindling now, but it's just, there is enormous, there is no single Basque. There are many, many Basques and they're quite different, and so the judgments there are tricky. But if we take, Preminger then gives us a reason for why person agreement in long distance agreement environments might be rare. So at this point, I'm not going to give you a theory of why person agreement is rare. That's something we should leave for later. Right now, just keep in mind, since our next tour is of a long distance agreement, if you find something that starts looking like person agreement, be very excited and also be careful. And then look carefully and try to understand what's going on. But in any case, keep track of the features involved. Okay, that's long distance agreement. Okay, now we can go back to the slides. So we can. Okay, so let's look at long distance agreement. So often, especially if you start from English, we are used to thinking of agreement as being subject-verb agreement, right? You expand the domain a little bit and then you say, fine, you don't have to agree with your subject, but you have to agree with an argument. You're not going around agreeing with something, with just anything. Okay. However, in Hindi, there are constructions where it looks like you agree with something that is not your argument. Okay? So, look at one. Vivek ne kitab padhni chahi. Chahi, kitab, under no one's theory, is an argument of want. Right? However you set this up, kitab is an argument of read, it's not an argument of want. Okay, that much we can agree with, right? However, it's also clear that kitab, this shahi on want, is coming from kitab. Okay. So this is a long distance agreement environment. Okay. So our goal will be to figure out what underlies this, where do you get this kind of agreement. Okay. So let's look at it a little bit further. So let's look at the kind of places where you get you only seem to get it out of non-finite clauses. Okay. So you see one example in one, which is a complement of want. Okay. It's if you start looking for long distance agreement, keep track of the verbs involved, because as we'll see, not all verbs will do. Okay. So want works. Another verb that works, and this is a verb come, but here it doesn't mean come, but it means no. Okay. Nadia ko gaadi chalani aati hai. Okay. So now here aati, which is not at all connected to gaadi directly, is agreeing with gaadi. Okay. Or in 2b, we have a construction that Miriam Bhatt calls the permissive. Nadia ne ped katne diye. Okay. And here you have pair, which is an argument of cut, which is agreeing with diye. Okay. And or you can look at a variant of 2b, which is Nadia ne Sarosh ko gaadi chalane di. So gaadi is an argument of chala, but it's agreeing with, but di is agreeing with this. Okay. So these are some environments. Let's just think about some other environments also. So one thing that I've not put here are modals. Okay, but they also involve long distance agreement. In fact, the one reason I did not put them here is that there it's tempting to argue whether it's really long distance. You could say, oh, like, so in English, if you go from the context of English, it's, if you take a sentence like John will leave, it feels odd to say that the presence of will makes the agreement long distance, right? Because will, it just feels like an auxiliary. But in at least some Hindi models look like that they